Find a formula for the n term of the sequence -1, 1, -1, 1, -1, and so on. We let n be an integer that starts with 1. So n's are 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. From this sequence, we see that the first term, a sub 1, is -1, a sub 2 is +1, a sub 3 is -1, a sub 4 is +1, a sub 5 is -1, and so on. The terms in the sequence are alternating between -1 and 1, and so only the signs change. What this means is that the term a sub n is a constant multiple of either 1 or -1. The expression that will determine whether the sign is negative or positive is -1 to the n power. This expression will determine the sign only, whether it is negative or positive. Observe that when n equals 1, we have a sub 1 is -1 to the 1 power, which is -1. When n equals 2, we have a sub 2 is -1 squared, which is +1, and so on. So the formula for the n term in this case is a sub n equals -1 to the n. This formula is not unique. We can obtain a sub n equals cosine of n pi, and it will work also for n equals 1. Cosine of -pi is -1. When n equals 2, cosine of 2 pi is 1, and so on. The sequence 1, -1, 1, -1, 1, -1 is similar. A sub 1 is now +1, a sub 2 is -1, a sub 3 is +1, and so on. A sub n is therefore -1 to the n, but this time we would need to start n with 0 instead of 1. Notice that when n equals 0, a sub 0 is -1 to the 0 power, which is +1. A sub 1 is -1 to the 1 power, which is -1. A sub 2 is -1 squared, which is +1. Now, if the restriction is that n has to be greater than or equal to 1, meaning we must start with n equals 1, 2, 3, and so on, then we change this formula to a sub n equals -1, but this time we want to make sure that the first power is 0, so that -1 to the 0 power is +1. So instead of using n as the power, we would use n minus 1. And we see that with this formula, when n equals 1, a sub 1 is -1 to the power 1 minus 1, which is -1 to the 0 power, or +1. So this works. Thus in this case, a sub n is -1 to the n if n start with 0, or a sub n equals -1 to the n minus 1 if n start with 1. And again, this formula is not unique. Although the formula is not unique, it must represent the n terms of the sequence.